Circus shows today are entertaining, but back in the 19th and 20th centuries, one thing made them iconic, and that was the sideshow, widely known as the freak show, a stage for individuals with rare abilities and those vastly different from the rest of us. Their photographs might seem surreal, but they were real people who once dominated the entertainment scene. These are the circus freaks who truly existed, shown through rare and powerful historical images. Let's start off with Number 15, Horace Riddler. Horace Riddler was an Englishman who abandoned a conventional life to reinvent himself completely. He transformed his entire body into a canvas of bold zebra-striped tattoos, becoming known worldwide as the Great Omi, or the Zebra Man. His appearance was unlike anything the sideshow had seen before. With his skin fully covered in alternating black and white patterns, Riddler required no elaborate tricks or complicated routines. His act was striking in its simplicity. He stood before spectators, allowing the sheer impact of his appearance to mesmerize them. Audiences couldn't look away. What made Riddler's transformation remarkable was the relentless commitment it demanded. He endured countless sessions of painful tattooing to achieve his final design. His devotion to becoming a living artwork set him apart as one of the most visually unforgettable figures in sideshow history. The Great Omi wasn't just a performer. He was a deliberate creation, a human who turned his own body into spectacle and legend. Number 14. The Human Caterpillar. The human caterpillar might look like a visual effects trick, but this was no illusion. He was a real man named Prince Randian. Born in the early 1900s with a rare congenital condition that left him completely limbless, Randian didn't spend his life hidden in shame. Instead, he carved out a legacy by proving his independence, sharp mind, and ability to perform everyday tasks without assistance. Most people with this condition develop severe complications involving the skull or lungs, often resulting in stillbirth or death shortly after delivery. But not Randian. He survived against the odds and went on to become a top-billed act in the U.S. sideshow scene. Audiences flocked to witness his jaw-dropping skills, rolling cigarettes, lighting them, shaving, painting, and even writing, all with his mouth. He showed the world that physical limitations didn't define his worth or talent. His act wasn't about sympathy, it was about control and precision. Number 13. Maximo and Bartola. Maximo and Bartola were a brother and sister pair born with microcephaly, a neurological condition that causes an unusually small skull and brain. Originally from the village of Decorah, El Salvador, they gained attention not for their personalities, but for their striking appearance. In 1848, they began touring in exhibitions, eventually arriving in the United States. P.T. Barnum, the circus mogul himself, renamed them the Aztec Children, falsely claiming they were descendants of ancient Mesoamerican royalty. Barnum's rebranding worked audiences lined up to see what they believed were living relics of a lost civilization. In truth, the siblings required constant care and had intellectual disabilities. Photographs of them from this time remain some of the earliest documentation of sideshow performers. Eventually, interest in Maximo and Bartola waned as newer freaks took the stage and the public's attention shifted. Though their fame faded, their legacy endures in history as an example of how physical difference was exploited. Number 12. Rasmus Nielsen. Many people have seen the striking photo, but few know the man behind it. His name wasn't Stanley Kubrick. That was the photographer. The man himself was Rasmus, a longtime circus performer who toured with Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers. Known for his brute strength and bizarre endurance acts, Nielsen became a spectacle for what he could do with his body. He had large nipple rings threaded with heavy chains, which he would then attach to anvils or weights and lift them off the ground. His earlobes were also pierced, and he'd hang 10-pound metal weights from them without flinching. Though his act was physically punishing, Nielsen had a soft side. He never had kids of his own, but he often visited hospitals, especially children's wards, bringing joy to young patients. After his death, he left all his belongings and savings to one of the hospitals he often visited. Strength defined his act, but kindness defined his legacy. Number 11. The Werewolf Girl. Alice Elizabeth Doherty, also called the Minnesota Woolly Girl, was better known in sideshow circles as the Werewolf Girl. She holds the rare distinction of being the only American born with hypertrichosis lanuginosa, a condition so unusual that most doctors had never seen a case like hers. From the day she was born, Alice had a fine layer of silky blonde hair covering her face and body, earning her nicknames like Baby Werewolf or American Wolf Girl. Her parents were stunned, unsure what to do, until showmen quickly realized Alice's unique look could draw crowds. Soon she was performing in traveling circuses paid to be stared at. But despite the fame and money, Alice remained modest. She never sought the spotlight. In 1915, she retired quietly in Dallas, where she spent her final years in peace. She passed away in 1933 at the age of 46, remembered not just for her appearance but for her calm, gentle spirit behind the hair. Number 10. Johnny Eck. Johnny was born with sacral agenesis, a rare congenital disorder that caused his lower body to remain drastically underdeveloped. He often described himself as if he'd been snapped off at the waist. Despite measuring only 18 inches as an adult, Johnny refused to be treated as fragile. Even as a toddler, he was already walking on his hands while his older, able-bodied brother hadn't even stood up yet, and that was just the beginning. As he grew, Johnny built a life rich with talent and success. He mastered painting, photography, model building, stage illusions, and Punch and Judy shows. His skills extended well beyond physical tricks. He had intelligence, wit, and creativity. Eck appeared in films, became a touring attraction, and lived a longer life than anyone expected. He died at 79 from a heart attack. He wasn't pitied, he was celebrated. He lived without compromise, proving that the body might be limited, but the spirit never had to be. Number 9. Maurice Tillet. If you think Shrek was just an animated ogre, think again. His design was inspired by Maurice Tillet, better known in the wrestling world as the French Angel. Born in 1903, Maurice was healthy in childhood and had a gentle, angelic face. But at 17, he was diagnosed with acromegaly, a hormonal disorder that causes bones to thicken and enlarge. His hands, feet, and facial structure began to change rapidly, giving him a striking appearance. Though he had hoped to become a lawyer, Maurice instead joined the French Navy and later turned to professional wrestling. In the 1930s and 1940s, he became a sensation in the ring, undefeated for nearly 2 years. Photos of him show an uncanny resemblance to the Shrek character later created by DreamWorks. Sadly, medical options were limited at the time, and his condition worsened. Maurice died of a heart attack in 1954 at age 51. Still, he's remembered as a gentle giant who turned his difference into greatness. What do you think about this legend? Let us know. Number 8. The Mule-Faced Woman. If you ever stumbled across a photo of Grace McDaniels, you'd probably assume it was fake, but it wasn't. Born in Numa, Iowa in 1888, Grace lived with a rare condition called Sturge-Weber syndrome that severely disfigured her face. For much of her life, society rejected her outright, so she took a different path. She joined a traveling circus billed cruelly as the ugliest woman in the world. But what started as a shock factor became something bigger. She earned a living, found admirers, and built an identity beyond the label. Despite the fact that many people in the audience would faint just at the sight of her, she gained real fans and even received multiple marriage proposals. Eventually, she accepted one and gave birth to a perfectly healthy child. Grace's story wasn't about ridicule, it was about resilience. She didn't hide. She stood in front of the world, made them look, and kept on living without apology or shame. Number 8. Annie Jones Elliott. Annie Jones, famously called the Esau Lady, was born in 1865 in Marion, Virginia. No one in her family had anything unusual, but Annie was born with a full mustache and began growing a beard by age 2. The rare condition, later identified as hirsutism, or potentially a form of hypertrichosis, made her a sideshow phenomenon. Her parents, unsure what to do, began exhibiting her to the public, initially at local fairs and eventually on national tours. By the time she was a teenager, Annie was one of the most recognized faces in the freak show circuit. She wasn't just famous for her appearance, though. She had charm, poise, and an ability to engage with audiences. She embraced elegant clothing and carried herself with confidence. Annie spent most of her life performing, and while the title Bearded Lady followed her everywhere, she turned it into a career. Her legacy lives on in the annals of circus history as one of its most iconic figures. Number 6. Lobster Boy. This wasn't about a boy owning lobsters. It was about a man whose hands resembled claws. Grady Franklin Stiles Jr. was born with ectrodactyly, a genetic disorder that caused his fingers and toes to fuse into lobster-like formations. Under the stage name Lobster Boy, Grady became a well-known circus performer, starting his career at just 7 years old. He built a fortune and public image, eventually marrying and raising 4 children, 2 of whom inherited his condition. Together, they toured as the Lobster Family. But beyond the tent, things turned dark. Grady was an alcoholic and physically abusive. It all escalated when he murdered his daughter's fiancée the night before their wedding. Due to his condition, no prison facility could accommodate him, so he received house arrest and probation. His violence didn't stop. Eventually, his family hired another sideshow performer to end his life. In 1992, Lobster Boy was shot and killed in his own home, a disturbing end to an already twisted legacy. Number 5. Joe Martin Lorello. Joe proved that judging by appearances is often misleading. At first glance, he looked like any other average citizen, nothing rare, no deformities or flair. But that changed when he performed his specialty. Lorello could rotate his head more than 120 degrees, a physical stunt that shocked and amazed his audience. He wasn't born with this eerie skill, nor was his head ever stuck backwards by some condition. It was a result of years of rigorous training. He committed 3 full years to mastering this movement, working his neck inch by inch until he finally perfected it. Lorello's unique act became widely sought after, especially when he demonstrated drinking a full beer with his head entirely turned around. But the feat came with limits. He couldn't breathe or smoke while holding the position, meaning his performances had to be perfectly timed. Joe wasn't just bending his body, he bent the limits of what most thought was physically possible. Number 4. The Elephant Man. When Joseph Merrick was born in Leicester, England in 1862, nothing suggested he'd be labeled a freak. But by age 5, his face began to swell, a bony mass appeared on his forehead, and his skin turned thick and rough. Over time, his condition worsened. Victorian society, unable to explain his appearance, created rumors. One even claimed his deformities came from his mother being knocked down by an elephant while pregnant. That tale became the inspiration for his stage name, the Elephant Man. Showmen promoted him as half man, half elephant, and curious crowds lined up to stare. But behind the stage persona was a deeply intelligent, gentle man. Despite being mocked, Merrick maintained grace and dignity. Eventually, he found refuge in a London hospital where he was treated with kindness and respect. He died at 27, most likely from asphyxiation while sleeping. Merrick's story continues to resonate, not because of how he looked, but because of how deeply human he remained. Number 3. Marianne Bevan. Unlike Grace, Marianne Bevan wasn't born with any disfigurement. She entered the world healthy and beautiful in the outskirts of London in the late 19th century. Photos of her early life show a young woman considered attractive by the standards of the time. But adulthood brought change. She began suffering from acromegaly, a rare and untreatable hormonal condition that caused severe bone growth. Over the years, her face, hands, and feet became distorted. History recalls a farmer once mocking her, telling her she'd easily win a world's ugliest woman contest. Rather than retreat, Marianne entered and won, beating over 250 contestants. The title wasn't flattering, but it brought opportunity. Sideshow owners saw her potential, and she turned her altered appearance into a way to provide for her family. Her story wasn't about shame, it was about survival. In a harsh world with no other options, Marianne didn't break down. She turned mockery into income and made it on her own terms. Number 2. Isaac W. Sprague. Isaac began life like any other kid. But at the age of 12, things began to change. After swimming one day, he fell ill and never stopped losing weight. Despite a healthy appetite, his body wasted away. Later, doctors identified his condition as extreme progressive muscular atrophy, an incurable disease that slowly stripped his body of muscle mass. By his mid-40s, Isaac stood over 5 feet tall but weighed only 43 pounds. His bones were pronounced, his frame so frail he looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin. Sprague became known as the living human skeleton and performed in numerous sideshows where people paid to see his gaunt appearance. Though his condition baffled physicians, his fame continued to grow. Sadly, despite his notoriety, he lived in near poverty and often struggled to survive. He died in 1887, still remembered as one of the most extreme human physiques ever documented, a life marked by illness and endurance. Number 1. Edward Mordrake. Edward Mordrake, sometimes spelled Mordrake, was an Englishman born in the 19th century with a disturbing and dangerous medical mystery, a second face on the back of his head. While the front of Edward's face was said to be handsome and normal, the second was described as both beautiful and grotesque, a face as lovely as a dream, but as wicked as a demon. According to stories, this second face didn't speak, but it would smirk when Edward cried, whispering torment into his ears while he tried to sleep. Though it couldn't eat or talk, the psychological toll of the constant presence became unbearable. He pleaded with doctors to have it removed, but no one dared try. Eventually, at just 23 years old, Edward took his own life. His final request was clear: destroy the second face so it wouldn't whisper to him in the grave. Whether fact or legend, his story became infamous after being published by a known hoax writer. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.